Thank you, UDC, for inviting us. This privilege to be on the panel with very senior compliance and legal professionals across the industry to talk about Trabelrul. To my left, I have Suki Che, who's from FTX, where she is the Chief Compliance Officer for Singapore. That's Neil Christiansen from Coinbase, where he is Senior Counsel on the Financial Crimes team. Then we have Mr. Hye-byung Lee, who is Head of Update. And finally, the gentleman on the left is Tariq Ek from Crypto.com, where he is SVP for Regulatory Compliance. All right, so can I invite each of you to do a quick introductions about the organizations you represent and, of course, yourselves.
Yeah, hi, 안녕하세요. My name is Suki Che. I'm the Chief Compliance Officer from FTX Singapore. So I look after all the regulatory and compliance related matters for FTX Singapore. A little bit about myself. In my previous life, I was an ex-regulator with the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And after that, I left MAS and I worked in various banks and financial institutions as a compliance professional before then coming over to FTX. Hope to have a fruitful conversation with everybody on the panel here.
Neil?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the organizers as well for this wonderful conference. My name is Neil Christiansen. I'm Senior Counsel at Coinbase, where I work on issues related to financial crimes, anti-money laundering sanctions, things like that. Really happy to be here with you today. I think Coinbase, like many of the folks here and the organizations you represent, we share a common goal of increasing economic freedom throughout the world, and obviously crypto is a powerful way to do that. So again, really happy to be here and be a member of this great panel.
I'm Hye-byung Lee from Dunamu Corporation. Seun, if you excuse me, I want to speak in Korean.
Yes, please, but let me
considering
get
most of the audience is my fellow Koreans.
All right.
예, 안녕하세요. 저는 업비트 두나무에 있는 이해붕이라고 합니다. 투자자 보호센터를 맡고 있고요. 31년간 공직에 금융감독 업무를 하다가 두나무에 조인하게 됐습니다. 최근에는 트래블룰을 도입한 특정금융정보법에 관한 그 주에서도 이렇게 작성을 했고요. 제가 정말 열심히 이 크립토 디지털 애셋에 대한 글로벌 규제 동향을 연구해서 많이 같이 나누고 있습니다. 이것은 우리 건전한 디지털 자산 산업 생태계 시장의 발전을 위한 그런 취지로 하고 있습니다. 오늘 여러분들 만나 뵙게 돼서 대단히 영광입니다. 감사합니다.
And Derek?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Tarker, and thank you to the UDC team for having us today. It's been a wonderful conference, and very fortunate to be here on such a great panel of experts. So my role at Crypto.com is heading the compliance group and regulatory group for Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa, where I drive our licensing efforts, AML program, and regulator communications. I've been working in the crypto space for quite some time now, 5 years, and quite a bit has changed since then. Prior to Crypto.com, I was with Paxos, a US-based exchange, and I currently work in our headquarters for Crypto.com in Singapore, and it's quite an interesting time in the compliance space, and just with constantly evolving regulations, and a lot to do for our team in terms of licensing and ensuring that we're compliant with changing regulatory landscape. So thank you again, and it's great to be here.
Thank you. Myself, I'm Seun. I'm from Singapore. I'm CEO of Benefitvest. We are leading global Trabelrul solution provider. We pride ourselves by building our solutions ground up with close industry and regulatory engagements. Since our production go live in March, we've processed in excess of 1.7 million transactions for our clients. Myself, I'm 23 years in the financial industry, both private and public sector, where I was working for MAS defining their data strategy. I realized that a lot of you are technologists, so we actually prepared a short video explaining what Trabelrul for the virtual asset industry is about. So if you could just focus your attentions on the screens in front of you, and Please enjoy.
Virtual assets, especially cryptocurrencies, have taken the world's financial system by storm, demonstrating its usefulness across multiple applications. Virtual assets offer many benefits, making payments faster, more affordable, and transparent. But the anonymous nature of virtual asset transactions present problems with ownership identification and can attract illicit activity. Recognizing these risks, the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, an intergovernmental body, has set standards to combat risks by recognizing virtual assets, then extending FATF standards to virtual assets before, applying travel rule requirements and providing guidelines. Correspondingly, jurisdictions started regulating virtual assets and enforcing travel rule, improving transparency by tracing ownership of virtual assets. The G7 finance ministers and FATF have called for the accelerated adoption of travel rule across the globe. The travel rule requires virtual asset service providers, or VASPs, to obtain, share, and verify originator and beneficiary information with virtual asset transfers. Travel rule should be an enterprise-wide exercise and not just a technology solution, including counterparty due diligence, internal policies and processes, collection and submission of required information, and monitoring. The FATF also prescribes other solution requirements of travel rule, such as immediate and secure transmission, scalability for large volume, and communication between VASPs.
Thank you. So I hope that very short video gave you a very high-level understanding and overview in terms of what Trevor is about. Just add a few more lines in terms of where we are. In the June targeted update from FATF, out of 98 jurisdictions, only 29 have drafted or enacted travel rule regulations or laws, of which only 11 have started actively enforcing, Korea being one of them. Right, so that's the quick update. In our panel discussion today, we'll take you through in terms of how the organizations are prepping for travel rule, given it's a new regulation that's sweeping the industry. Then, of course, we want to take you through some of the challenges before, given the technology background that you all have, talking a little bit about what practitioners in the industry are looking out for in the travel rule solution before ending with looking ahead, and we'll probably have some time for questions after that. So let's jump to our first topic in terms of how organizations are prepping for travel rule. Korea was one of the first jurisdictions to actively enforce travel rule. I mean, can you please share some of your experiences in getting ready to comply with these regulations?
Of course. So, one of the things that's, I think, really interesting about this field, especially coming from as a lawyer, is that, the travel rule, as we described, it's a 30, 40-year-old regulation in many parts of the world that we're all attempting to apply to this very novel and complex asset class. And it's really interesting to think about some of the unique challenges, but also the potential that unlocks. In the United States, working with one of our regulators, FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, we've been able to, we've had a productive relationship with them in helping to better understand the nature of the travel rule and how it may apply to crypto. I think what we've seen throughout the conference is that there's a wide variety of crypto products and services. So, and sometimes the first question that we have to think about is this even a service that the travel rule would apply to? Is it, for instance, a custodial service versus something else? And that's a really critical question for companies like Coinbase and some of the others represented here today who offer a wide variety of services. Of course, the next question is if, the travel rule does apply to the product or service that you're offering, how do we actually accomplish that? Because unlike traditional finance, there wasn't an existing infrastructure or network that would allow us to comply with the travel rule. That's really something that a lot of us had to envision and build for ourselves. One thing that we've done at Coinbase, much like with VerifyVASP, we've helped develop the trust solution, which again is an attempt, an industry-led effort to answer a lot of these very difficult and complex questions. But it's a fascinating field, and I think like many of us, we're certainly very keen to see how the regulatory landscape is going to continue to develop.
Thank you, Neil. That's very insightful in terms of what's happening in the United States. Mr. Lee, if I could ask you, what has Upbit or Dunamu been doing to prep in the lead up to the active enforcement in March? Yeah.
이 한국은 이 트래블룰을 적극적으로 실천한 빠른 나라들 중에 하나입니다. 2019년에 그죠? 2019년에 법안을 마련해서 2020년에 특정금융정보법 이 트래블룰을 도입하는 이 법안을 개정을 해서 2021년 3월부터 시행을 했고요. 그 중에 트래블룰은 1년 더 감독 목적상 1년 더 시행 시기를 연장을 해서 2022년 3월 25일부터 시행을 했습니다. 이 개정 특정금융정보법이 요구하고 있는 사항은 몇 가지가 있습니다. 간략히 말씀드리면 첫째는 FIU, 코피유라고 하는데 Korea Financial Intelligence Unit이라고 합니다. 금융정보 분석원에 첫째 등록을 해라. 그다음에 두 번째는 이 고객 확인, Customer Due Diligence CDD라고 합니다. 이 고객 확인 의무를 마치지 않고서는 어떤 트랜잭션도 취급해서는 안 된다. 그다음에 세 번째는 이 고객별로 그 트랜잭션 레코드를 분리해서 관리하라. 그다음에 네 번째는 이 코피유에 등록하지 않은 사업자들하고는 영업을 목적으로 거래해서는 안 된다. 그 다음으로 이 임계점이 있습니다. threshold라고 그러는데 이 100만 원을 넘어가는 트랜잭션이 있으면 그 100만 원 이상에 해당하는 트랜잭션을 보내는 오리지네이터 그리고 받는 베네피셔리의 이름과 그 지갑 주소, 월렛 어드레스를 제공을 하라고 하는 것이고 세 번째는 만약에 코피유하고 저쪽에 받는 레시피언트 바스프가 요구하게 되면 그 보내는 자의 그 주민등록번호, 실명번호죠. 그다음에 외국인 뭐 패스포트 넘버, 그다음에 외국인 등록번호 이런 것들을 제공을 하도록 이렇게 돼 있습니다. 3일 안에 그 요청일로부터 3일 안에. 그다음에 이제 네 번째는 이러한 그 공유되는 정보에 대해서 confidentiality 그 비밀을 유지하라 이런 요구 조건이 있습니다. 이런 법적 요구를 받아서 저희들은 이 준수할 때 좀 고민 사항이 있었습니다. 특히 이제 글로벌리 보면 이 트래블룰을 준수하는 나라가 있을 수 있고 그렇지 않은 나라가 있을 수 있습니다. 그래서 저희는 이 자금세탁방지 위험을 좀 낮추고 그다음에 트래블룰을 잘 지키기 위해서 저희들이 실시하는 이제 듀 딜리전스를 통과한 그리고 그 지갑 주소가 저희 유저와 그 동일하다고 하는 그 동일성에 대해서 검증을 통과한 이런 분들에 대해서만 트랜스퍼를 지원을 하는 그런 역할을 하고 있고요. 크게는 이 베리파이바스프 솔루션을 유지하고 그다음에 그 월렛 홀더에 대해서 아이덴티피케이션 요 서비스를 제공하는 사업자들하고만 이렇게 지원을 하고 있다는 말씀을 드립니다.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Lee. Definitely heartwarming to hear that the industry came together, worked together as one, and engaged the regulators who were actually willing to accommodate some changes as suggested by the industry. So that's definitely very enlightening on that. Appreciate it. Tariq, moving on to you. I mean, congratulations on Crypto.com being awarded quite a number of licenses in the recent months, some of which are already enforcing travel rules such as UK, Singapore, right? Could you just share from Crypto.com's perspective, what have you been doing to prep for travel rule?
Sure. Yeah, we're on quite a good run, right? We, as a core requirement for getting licensed in new markets that we're entering, is compliance with the travel rule and just demonstrating that not only we understand what the regulators expect and are meeting what the local requirement is going to be, because while the FATF guidance provides a guideline of what travel rule compliance looks like, each market is going to have their own tailored solution to be incorporated in their crypto regulation. So what we try and do is localize what our travel rule process will be based on each market to ensure we're in full compliance with what the regulators expect. And we've also participated on a consultative nature where we can provide some of the challenges that compliance with travel rule entails, the operational work, and just big questions where does this apply, does it not? And that's been a very, I think, helpful relationship to have with our regulator counterparts globally.
Thank you. Thank you. Suki, moving on to FTX, you guys are also expanding globally. Do you mind sharing some of your experience with that as well?
Yeah, so I guess as everyone is aware, FTX, our founder, Samuel Bankman-Fried, his mission is really to be regulated in as many jurisdictions as possible. So with that comes then, certain challenges such as how do you comply with travel requirements in various jurisdictions where they have varying requirements depending on the jurisdiction. So what we really look out for is really travel rule solution providers that have experience dealing with regulators worldwide, in as many countries as possible, and also a travel solution provider that is able to understand each jurisdiction's regulatory requirement, so that they can also help FTX comply in that respective jurisdiction. And of course, what we also would prefer would be a solution that is as comprehensive as possible, and in terms of the API integration and stuff, would be very seamless with the integration with our exchange, and of course takes up as least amount of dev time and dev work as much as possible.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right. Sounds like we all never walk alone. We need to work together as an industry, if that's the takeaway from
Absolutely.
this discussion. Yep. Now, moving on to the next topic, which is the challenges. I mean, clearly, this is a new regulation that's transforming the entire industry. If I could just stay on you, Suki, what are some of the challenges that you have faced in bringing your organization up to compliance?
Travel rule is it's a sunrise issue
Yep.
in the whole entire industry, where every one of us is trying to figure out how best to interpret the regulations, and obviously how best to go about complying with them, and then in turn operationalizing the solutions that you have in place. So I guess that's really the main challenge, I would say, in
Right.
terms of us understanding the travel requirements. And I feel like what I have found helpful with me addressing that challenge is to really lean in on industry associations who are looking into travel requirements, and also talk to your industry peers, for example, Coinbase, and of course, Upbit and Crypto.com, to see what are they doing for their companies. And travel is something that essentially it's something that would allow your users to transfer from one exchange to another. So if all the exchanges are adopting the same kind of measures, I think that will really help a lot in terms of travel requirements compliance. Yeah.
Nice. Mr. Lee, it's been about 6 months now since Dunamu Upbit has been running with travel rule compliance. Will you be able to share some of the challenges that you've experienced?
지난 6개월이죠. 그러나 이제 그 준비 과정까지 하면 1년이 훨씬 넘고 2년이 훨씬 넘습니다. 좀 아쉬웠던 점하고 그 얻었던 교훈 이렇게 말씀을 드리고자 합니다. 첫 번째 이제 아쉬웠던 경우는 싱가포르에서의 경험과 같이 이 감독 당국, 규제 당국과 이 업계 간의 이 트래블룰 시행을 위한 그 긴밀한 리에이전, 코디네이션 미팅 이런 것들이 좀 없었고요. 그리고 구체적인 가이드라인이 없어서 저희들이 이 마련했던 트래블룰이 정말 그 규제 당국이 요구하는 기대 수준에 부합하는 것일까 이런 고민들도 많이 했고, 또 이 블록체인의 그 트랜스퍼 트랜잭션의 특성상 이렇게 인바운드로 들어오는 거에 대해서 저희가 컨트롤하거나 태클을 걸기가 굉장히 어렵습니다. 그래서 저희가 나름대로 베리파이바스프하고 그다음에 그 검증 절차를 거친 거에 대해서만 이렇게 컨트롤하고 블로킹하고 그러는데, 그런 것이 과연 그런 규칙들이 이 규제 당국이 생각하는 기대 수준에 맞는 것인지, 왜냐하면 거기에는 그 상세한 이 가이드라인 규칙들이 없이 이 업계에서 이렇게 각각 마련했기 때문에 그렇습니다. 예컨대 이런 것도 있습니다. 어느 정도까지 이제 그 법규를 준수하는 사업자의 책임일까? 이런 관점에서 그렇습니다. 예컨대 이 트래블룰을 준수하지 않는 이 인바운드 디파짓이 있었는데, 이거를 돌려드리게 될 때 이 돌려드리는 그 시점에 크립토 애셋의 그 가격이 이렇게 떨어진다든지 저쪽에 디파짓 할 때보다 이랬을 때 어느 정도까지가 그 가상자산 사업자의 책임일 것인지, 그리고 이 조작한 정보가 있거든요. 이 manipulated evidence에 대해서 이 가상자산 사업자가 어느 정도 확인할 책임이 있는지, 그리고 트래블룰을 마련하지 않은 나라에 있는 그 가상자산 사업자 바스프하고 이렇게 거래 관계를 할 때, 트랜스퍼를 할 때 우리가 지원을 해야 되는지 말아야 되는지 이런 그 구체적인 정보가 없었고요. 그리고 이런 경우도 있습니다. 100만 원이라고 하는 트러스트 홀드가 있는데요. 이 100만 원이라고 하는 요 임계치를 넘어가지 않은 것, 또 넘어간 것, 요 경계선이 되게 판단이 어렵습니다. 이게 저쪽에서 인출해 올 때, 그리고 저희들한테 입금해 올 때 가격이 뭐 떨어지거나 올라가거나 이랬을 때 어떻게 할 것인가. 그래서 저희는 그 지갑 주소 고객이 유저가 입금할 때, 저쪽에서 출금할 때 가격이 100만 원 이상이었다고 하는 그 가치 증명을 해주면 저희가 입금을 허용하는 이런 규칙들을 갖고 있습니다. 그래서 제가 이제 결과적으로 말씀드리면 우리가 시행 6개월 됐지만 이 시작할 때부터 충분한 커뮤니케이션, 당국하고 업계하고 이렇게 있었으면 저희가 그 가이던스에 따라서 충분히 트래블룰을 모범적으로 이렇게 실천할 수 있지 않았을까 하는 약간의 아쉬움은 있지만 저희가 하나하나 그 어려움을 극복을 해나가고 있다, 이렇게 말씀드릴 수 있습니다.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, for the very candid sharing, including your lessons learned. Regulatory engagement, international engagement, definitely a recurring theme in today's discussion. Neil, if I could just turn to you. I mean, in the US, there's been a lot of lobbying from the industry as well as seemingly action from the Biden administration. What are some of the challenges that Coinbase is facing?
Sure. So I think with respect to the travel rule, we really all have to remind ourselves that we have built these networks, these travel rule solutions from the ground up. Several years ago, these basically did not exist for crypto. So in a very short time, we've gone from zero coverage to significant coverage. And I think that's a testament to how important this issue is to the industry. So I echo what's been said about the importance of industry coming together. That's been the focus that we've taken with trust. And if you can imagine the challenges of trying to construct a platform with one of your competing exchanges, try to do it with over 50. But nevertheless, that's something that our coalition has come together to do, again, just reflecting how important it is that we get this right. But of course, it presents challenges because in the traditional finance context, they have certain benefits that we may not have in crypto. So for instance, if HSBC wants to send funds to another bank, there's really no question about that there's a receiving financial institution on the other side of that transaction. But as we know, crypto exchanges don't always have that luxury. We always need to be thinking about how can we identify whether the counterparty is in fact another exchange, a self-hosted wallet, or something else. So overcoming that challenge has been something that's very top of mind for trust and other travel rule solutions. Of course, even if you can overcome that issue, there's the next one, which is how are you going to securely transmit the travel rule information to your counterparty? I think it's safe to say that for exchanges like us, our customers' name, address, their personal information, that's amongst the most important and sensitive information that any of us have. So it's extraordinarily important that we have safe channels to transmit that and that we know that we're transmitting it to the right counterparty. And further, that they're going to treat that data appropriately. They're going to protect it and safeguard it once we send it to them. So these are definitely some of the challenges that are always at the forefront of our minds and that we're trying to overcome through trust and other travel rule solutions.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing up the focus on data protection and data privacy. I think it's not unique to US, even in Korea, when the industry was grappling to come up in compliance with Trabelrul, data protection and privacy was one of the top agenda topics. I think we see that in the European parliamentary discussions as well, in terms of if you can't trust that you can send your data securely, you shouldn't even be doing it, right? So I think that's a consistent theme around Trabelrul compliance. Tariq, with Crypto.com, what are some of the challenges that you guys face as you expand across?
Yeah, so I'd like to emphasize again just the nature of collaboration this is requiring. I am speaking daily to my counterparts at other exchanges and things. While we may be seen as competitors, it's kind of a watershed moment for the industry, and it's really requiring a lot of collaboration because ultimately, at the heart of it is what's good for your customers. And that's what I try and look at Trabelrul through the lens of, because your average customer, they just want to make sure they have a frictionless experience to move their assets, which they have the right to do so. They don't know what Trabelrul may be or care who FATF is, but we have to serve their interests in terms of keeping their funds secure and be able to, and as well as their data secure and be able to move their assets in a frictionless manner. So I think the other big challenge, and this it goes in line with the nature of collaboration, is making sure you're growing your network of what VASP you're connected to. So my responsibility at Crypto.com is make sure we can exchange Trabelrul information with as many compliant VASP as we can. And sometimes it requires difficult decisions where this counterparty may not be acceptable for a variety of reasons. But in these early days of developing the Trabelrul, we want to make sure that the VASP network that we are connected to is as large as possible. And we've highlighted some solutions and some of the vendor solutions that are developing. But at Crypto.com, we're agnostic, where we just want to make sure our customers can be connected to move their assets in as many compliant VASPs as possible.
Very good point on customer centricity. Customers should always come first, and I think we're all on the same page in terms of regulations shouldn't be impeding transactions. It shouldn't be impeding the blockchain, the benefits of the blockchain, right? So I mean, with that, let's move on to our next section, which is what do you look for in a Trabelrul solution? We know that the FATF actually, in their guidance, they do publish certain guidelines in terms of what Trabelrul solutions providers should provide. I mean, considering the audience here are mostly technical, could I just ask the panel what are some of the key features that you would want, or what's your wish list in the Trabelrul solution, right? Maybe if I could just stay with Tariq, could you just share what would your ideal Trabelrul solution be?
Yeah, I think to emphasize again is which solution is going to connect us with the most VASP possible. And I think that's the nature of, if it is a good solution, then the VASP will kind of come and join the network. And for us, we look at security and the seamlessness of integration, because you're almost adding something to a moving car. The business is operating, transactions are going, and now we have to add this really huge requirement to our business kind of on the fly. So we want to look at something that's going to be most seamless from a technical integration standpoint, but also from the nature of our business that's already happening, making sure that can be compatible with what we're doing. And as well as we're looking for a solution provider that we can also communicate well with and provide our feedback, and this is what's working for us or what may be challenging. And we are running test sessions with some of our providers. We're connected with other VASPs to just kind of work out some of these operational kinks that are bound to come up. And so I think when we look for a solution, we want someone that we can kind of grow with and help make this work for all of us.
Thank you. Neil, I mean, if I could just turn the attention to you. You've mentioned trust several times. I mean, clearly you had the benefit of developing a solution ground up. What were some of the key requirements that went into that?
Well, I think Tariq, put a lot of these key principles, put it very well. We want a solution. I think we all want a solution that's going to provide us frictionless an experience for the customers, and then it's going to meet all of our needs. To go beyond that, I think one thing that's really important for us in building trust, and I know it's important for other VASPs, is to, one, be as confident as possible that there is in fact a VASP on the other side of that transaction. So, we know there's a variety of tools at our disposal to try and answer those questions. For instance, blockchain analytics. You can simply ask your customer to attest where the funds are going. Those are important tools, and they should always be in our toolkits. But we also know that those tools may not always give us, complete confidence as to the identity of the counterparty. So one thing that we've tried to do is to develop a system that allows us to confidently identify that who the counterparty is, and it is in fact another VASP, and that they actually control the deposit address. So that's really important because, again, we want to know who are we going to be sending our customers information to. And just in conjunction with that, having appropriate due diligence procedures in place to help us better understand that counterparty. What is their data security policy like? What are their information privacy procedures? How robust are those? And again, the FATF has emphasized the importance of understanding a counterparty's data protection and privacy policies. Because again, we don't want to be in a position, if we can avoid it, of having to share our customers' personal information with a company who's not going to treat it appropriately. So trying to build a solution that meets all of those core values has been very important.
Thank you. Thank you. Very insightful. Mr. Lee, if I could ask you, again, based on your experience in Korea, what are some of the key features you look out for in the 트래블룰 solution, and what has worked for you?
여러분도 잘 아시다시피 이제 이 트래블룰이라고 하는 것은 자금 이동 규칙입니다. 그 자금 그리고 가상자산을 보내는 이 오리지네이터의 정확한 정보를 보내는 가상자산 사업자가 파악을 해서 갖고 있으라는 것이고, 그 받는 베네피셔리 바스프한테 보내고 그쪽 받는 쪽에 가상자산 사업자는 자기 고객인 이 베네피셔리에 대한 정확한 정보를 파악해서 서로 공유하라는 것이거든요. 그런 그 원칙하에 저희가 이제 구현한 이런 기술적인 솔루션에 대해서 좀 말씀드린다고 하면, 첫째는 이 지갑 소유자에 대해서 정말 그 사람의 것인지 이 점유 인증입니다. 이 occupancy certification인데, 이거를 하기 위해서 이제 저희가 제3자가 제공한 이 사진 증명이라든지 동영상 촬영 방식이 아니라 저희가 기술적인 방법으로 신속한 그 등록 이것을 이제 구현을 했다는 말씀을 드리고, 또 하나는 그 지갑 소유자가 저쪽 해외에 있는 유저와 저희들의 유저와 동일하냐, 그 동일성, sameness에 대해서 어떻게 할 것이냐, 검증할 것이냐, 이런 측면에서 저희는 이제 베리파이 네임이라는 그런 솔루션을 가지고 그 사람의 이름 그리고 생년월일 여기에 대한 그 해시 값을 가지고 검증하는 이런 솔루션을 갖고 있고요. 그리고 세 번째로는 다들 얘기하지만 이 해외에 있는 이 글로벌 트랜잭션이기 때문에 해외에 있는 가상자산 사업자가 실제 이 트래블룰을 준수하는지 그렇지 않은지 이런 것을 확인하려면 1대 멀티플로 컨택을 해서 확인을 해야 되는 복잡한 부담스러운 작업이 있습니다. 이런 것을 저희는 이제 베리파이바스프의 그 얼라이언스에 가입을 해서 서로 API를 커뮤니케이션을 통해 가지고 서로 확인을 하고 이러한 절차를 간소화하고 있다. 이렇게 말씀을 드리겠습니다. Thank you.
Nice. So it does sound like you guys already have all your policies and procedures in place. Everything's running pretty much clockwork. But definitely, I think the preparation that you talked about earlier does help a lot. Suki, if I could just turn the attention to you. What about FTX? What would your wish list be?
The gentlemen here have highlighted all very good points, so I shall not rehash them because I fully agree with them about, basically data privacy and counterparty due diligence and be able to identify who you're transferring the funds to. I think ideally, in an ideal situation, we should have a SWIFT equivalent, for our crypto industry, where we just rely on one provider, hopefully, so that there is just maximum interoperability. And obviously, the Trabelrul packet information is being transmitted to the counterparty VASP together with the transaction on the blockchain. So everything is being done together, and basically there's no delay in any of that transmission of information or transfer of the crypto assets. I think that will be my wish list and ideal scenario in the future for the travel industry. And obviously, right now, FTX is really just looking at, what is the best travel solution provider out there who can fulfill all the criteria that the gentlemen have pointed out earlier just now. Which is why one of the travel solution providers we're using is actually Berepaibasp.
Oh, thank you. Right. I'm glad you brought up the analogy to SWIFT, because I think it's important to note that SWIFT also started out as an alliance, pretty much to what Neil said earlier. But I also like to highlight that SWIFT probably took at least 30 to 40 years to get to where it is today. And I think after a few years, I think the crypto industry has pretty much not on par with SWIFT, but at least we are catching up. So I think we are moving way faster, testimony to the Web3 audience here as well.
Fully agree.
Thank you. So let's move on to the next topic in terms of looking ahead. Clearly, I think the term sunrise issues was mentioned a couple of times today. The travel rule is definitely in its infancy. There's going to be a lot more jurisdictions that's going to come online in terms of regulations and enforcement. So, definitely this industry will not most likely, but will definitely be transformed with the onset of travel rule enforcement. So, I mean, looking ahead, can I just maybe seek the views of the panel in terms of what you see the future holds? And this time, maybe I could start with Neil at Coinbase.
Of course. So, obviously it's a very interesting time for the travel rule and, of course, for crypto and crypto regulation in general. I think, a lot of us are, watching with a lot of interest developments around the world in terms of how the travel rule is going to be implemented. So we know, for instance, and the FATF has highlighted, that some countries are relatively ahead of the curve in terms of actually imposing and even enforcing the travel rule. There's many countries and jurisdictions, for instance, the European Union, where we anticipate that some of those rules are going to come into effect within the next few years. And there are other countries where it's maybe not on their radar yet, but I think we have every reason to expect that the travel rule, as it applies to crypto, it will continue to be the law of the land all throughout the world. So of course, we're keenly observing all of this, and I think our hope is that regulators will take into mind some of the unique benefits that crypto has and really try to apply a crypto native approach to thinking about some of the how certain regulations with respect to the travel rule can apply to exchanges, as opposed to trying to impose older models which maybe made sense for traditional finance but are maybe not quite as appropriate for crypto. So that's definitely something we're continuing to think about. Of course, we're also thinking about what the future is going to bring in terms of the travel rule solution landscape. I think certainly the hope is that no exchange would want to have to sign up for a dozen, 2 dozen different solutions. So I think we are hoping that ultimately, the solution networks can continue, their coverage networks can continue to expand, and that there will be more harmony within the industry. But again, harmony while maintaining some of those core values we talked about before, like protecting customer privacy, doing due diligence on counterparties, and things like that. So we really hope those values will continue to inform the regulatory discussions going forward.
Thank you. Oh, Tariq, could you provide some pointers on that?
Yeah, so if I could share what I think for what's next is probably preaching patience for the industry, but also consumers and regulators, where we are figuring this out and working very hard to do so. And there's a lot of challenges, both operationally but just considerations just from we're trying to build something that's new here. And as Neil said, we can't necessarily apply the frameworks we had from traditional financial institutions to a crypto native business. And I think what we're going to do is continue to try and educate our customers and as well as regulatory bodies globally, where this is something that it's part of the maturation for the asset class, and everyone here in this room wants to see crypto win. And as part of WAGME, I think Trabelrul is certainly part of that, where this is going to be something that is a reality, and it's going to change, I think, the experience for crypto, but also it keeps this asset class, I think, from doing harm and to, I think, really mature as the industry is.
I like the crypto. We are all here for crypto to win.
Yeah.
But Suki, I mean, looking ahead, what do you think?
I mean, Trabelrul is here to stay for sure, right?
Yeah.
And I think we need to remember why was there enactment of the Trabelrul regulation in the first place? And I think it's really to protect the customers, protect the users, and really to weed out the bad actors, right? So I think if you are doing legitimate transfers and businesses on the crypto exchanges itself, I think there is basically no need to worry in terms of your activities on the exchanges, and the Trabelrul is really to protect all the users on using the platforms. And I suppose, going forward, I would really like to see there to be a more homogeneous adoption of regulations across different jurisdictions. Just because crypto exchanges like FTX, Coinbase, and Upbit, and Crypto.com, we operate in many jurisdictions. And I guess having different types of threshold amount, de minimis threshold amount, and regulations can certainly pose challenges in terms of our business operation, and also in terms of whether or not whether it's user friendly or not. So I think looking forward, I think that's what I hope.
Thank you.
The regulations will look like. Yeah.
Regulatory.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Lee, what does the future hold?
원칙적으로 이렇게 말씀드리면 이 자금 이동 규칙인 트래블룰은 여러분들 잘 아시는 9/11 있죠. 9/11 테러 이후에 그 자금이 어디에서 와서 어디에 불법적으로 쓰이고 있는지를 추적을 하기 위해서 도입된 것입니다. 이것이 이제 전통적인 금융산업, 금융성 활동과 관련해서 적용을 되다가 이제 크립토 애셋, 디지털 애셋, 버추얼 애셋에도 이제 적용이 되겠죠. 그렇게 되게 된 것이고, 그래서 저희 업비트로서는 이 AML 그리고 CFT 이런 요건들을 준수하는 것을 최우선으로 삼고 있습니다. 그래서 저희가 이 AML이라든지 CFT, 테러자금조달, 자금세탁방지에 있어서 민간의 건전한 파트너 역할을 최선을 다해서 할 수 있도록 전문적인 역량을 갖춘 인력들도 최일선에 아주 50여 명 이상 그 인력을 이렇게 배치를 했고, 그러한 또 기술, 새로 발전하는 기술, 또 우리가 할 수 있는 것, 그리고 베리파이바스프를 통해서 할 수 있는 것, 이런 것들을 전부 갖춰가면서 베리파이바스프 얼라이언스하고 이런 그 사업자의 서로 확인하는, 검증하는 이런 네트워크를 형성을 하고 있다, 이렇게 말씀을 드리겠습니다. Thank you.
Thank you. I like your point about Upbit putting its most talented and smart employees at the forefront of AML regulation, which is why we probably have Mr. Lee in the forefront here. That's it. I mean, I think those were most of the topics. I think it's important to emphasize that regulation is not a bad thing. In fact, I think for crypto to win, this is necessary, right? To weed out the illicit activity that regulators previously had concern about. Trabelrul is here to stay, and I think definitely we could work together as an industry internationally to resolve and overcome the issues that we heard today. Before we break we take questions, I'd like just to throw it out again to the panel here, if you have any closing remarks that you'd like to make. Anyone? Yeah. So, Neil, please.
Well, I think it's remarkable that obviously we all come from different companies, but I think you've heard there's quite a bit of alignment here in terms of shared concerns and really a shared passion for ensuring that the regulations, travel regulations, are done right in a way that's going to obviously address some of the underlying illicit finance concerns, which is the whole reason the travel rule exists to begin with, but is also going to be imposed and crafted in such a way that is responsive to some of the unique characteristics of crypto. So I think it's remarkable that industry is coming together to answer some of these really difficult questions, and I hope that conversations like this can continue, and I'm sure they will.
Thank you.
For me.
Oh, yes, please.
제가 보기에는 이 트래블룰이라고 하는 것이 이 디지털 에셋 산업에 그리고 블록체인 이코시스템의 책임이고 건전한 발전을 가로막기 위한 것이 아니고 정말 불법적인 행동을 좀 태클을 걸고 그 자금의 이동을 추적할 수 있는 그런 관점에서 도입된 것이다. 이것이 이 글로벌 트래블룰의 그 기본적인 그 지침, 어떤 방향성이 돼야 된다. 저는 이렇게 생각을 합니다. 이제 지금 이 글로벌리 보면 그 FATF를 포함을 해서 그 표준을 세팅하는 수립하는 여러 기구들이 굉장히 그 지속적으로 협력을 하고 있습니다. 이렇게 되면 지금까지 왔던 어떤 discrepancy 어떤 그 차이 아니면 또는 그 disparity 불균형 이런 것들이 이제 좀 정비가 되면 정말 이 가상자산 사업자들끼리 서로 이 베리파이하고 서티파이하는 이런 절차들이 훨씬 쉬워지지 않을까. 그리고 각국의 규제 당국들이 그 위험 평가 기준 뭐 이런 것들을 사업자들한테 이렇게 좀 제시해주면 그 사업자 민간의 파트너인 사업자들이 좀 더 수월하게 그 AML 또 트래블룰 준수를 쉽게 해나갈 수 있지 않을까 이런 생각을 합니다. 제가 이런 말씀을 드리는 것은 FATF의 그 2019년 그 RBA 가이던스에서도 이 정부 당국이 우리 그 중소 규모의 가상자산 사업자들이 이 레코멘데이션을 준수하는 것을 도와주어야 한다. 이런 그 레코멘데이션이 있습니다. 그런 관점에서 볼 때 당국도 결국은 우리 사회의 건전한 금융 또는 디지털 에셋 그 이코시스템을 마련한다는 차원에서 민간 사업자도 좀 도와주십사. 어떤 가이던스를 명확하게 법적 명확성을 더욱 명확하게 이렇게 해주면은 민간 사업자들이 건전하게 그 역할을 다할 것이다. 이런 말씀을 드립니다. Legal clarity is very required, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. Ecosystem like that. Suki or Tariq, any comments? Any closing comments before we take questions?
Yeah, I think just quickly to share that this work that we're doing on travel rule, we're keeping in mind just the core values in crypto, where it's decentralization and to do it with financial inclusion. And hopefully we're going to be able to get this right in a way that we'll be solving in a new way for issues in the traditional legacy financial world and in our own crypto native way.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with you, Tariq, and I think as long as we continue to work together as an industry and participate actively in industry roundtables and panels like this, and also maintain an active dialogue with the regulators, I think we'll all be able to make it. Is that the slang now? Yeah.
Crypto wins. Let's open it up for questions. I understand there are 5 questions.
Yes, here are the questions.
Right. Trevor has risks that can dilute the blockchain characteristics. Is there any risk it becomes the same case as red flag law of UK in the past? Anyone wants to take this?
I think to start, this is just per necessity of offering financial services, which crypto is now being regulated as, and every country is going to have their own type of requirements here, and travel rule will be included in that. So while that's as I was sharing, that we want to keep the spirit and values of crypto as part of our development with the travel rule, but this is something that it's a hard requirement for financial institutions, which we're being regulated as.
이 레드 플래그에 대해서는 사실 두 가지 개념이 있습니다. 하나는 이 어떤 코션, 주의라는 측면이 있고, 지금 질문하신 분 입장에서는 어떤 블록체인 생태계의 발전을 가로막는 이러한 불필요한 규제, 발목을 잡는 이런 걸로 이제 생각을 하신 것 같은데요. 이 블록체인이 완전히 디센트럴라이제이션인 것은 맞습니다. 그러나 제가 아까 말씀드렸듯이 규제 당국자들 그리고 FATF는 건전하고 안전한 시민들의 생명 보호 이런 것을 어떤 테러자금조달이라든지 자금세탁 이런 전제된 범죄로부터 금융 시스템을 보호하고자 하는 국가 안보를 보호하고자 하는 이런 니즈가 있었기 때문에 하는 것이고, 그런 측면에서 컴플라이언트한 이 블록체인 이코시스템이라고 하면 뭐 결코 두려워할 것은 아니라고 저는 생각을 합니다.
Thank you. I apologize. I have to let Tariq leave. He's actually taken time off his very busy schedule. He has to rush for a flight. But I promise you we'll take the remaining questions. Thank you, Tariq.
Thank you.
I'll catch you back in Singapore. Next question. In the future, is there a possibility that the travel rule threshold changes from 1 million won to something of higher value? Maybe I'll take this first. If anything, we are seeing a trend, and this is just what we observe from what the regulators are doing. If anything, it is actually lowering, if not do away with it altogether. I think Neil will probably talk about it, but the US, I think there's some proposals of bringing it down from the original amount. Even in the EU parliamentary discussions, they are talking about travel rule from the first euro, meaning there is no threshold at all. And my understanding is that this is already implemented in countries like Switzerland, no de minimis. But I mean, are there any views on this?
Well, just to echo what you say, I think we're seeing some divergence in terms of how different jurisdictions are approaching this issue. There are some places where there is no, the travel rule applies to virtually every transaction once you are above €1, for instance. Other places, like in the United States, we currently have a higher threshold of $3,000. I think, aside from the questions about whether some of those limits are prudential, whether it would be appropriate to alter those, just to bring it back to the notion of how do exchanges, how do VASPs comply with the travel rule obligations. This is also really important for VASPs that are dealing in cross-border transfers. So if you can imagine, a VASP located in one country, they send funds to a second country. Well, the amount of the funds is below the threshold in the first country, so they don't send travel rule information. But that same value is above the threshold in the second country, which means they may need to go back to the first VASP and acquire the information. So, this is just another manifestation of the sunrise issue, which we were talking about. I think in a perfect world, there would be more harmony between some of these thresholds. That may be a little bit too much to hope for, but in the meantime, we need to ensure that travel rule solutions can accommodate these likely inevitable differences between how different countries are applying the travel rule.
Thank you. Any comments from Suki or Mr. Lee?
No, I mean, maybe just to add to that is, I think apart from, just a previous question, apart from the threshold, I mean, regulators can also look at the type of information that they want to collect, depending on the threshold amount. So I think that's something that we have to look out for too.
Okay. What's your view on the pace of speed of development of crypto regulations in the US, Singapore, and Korea? Well, clearly there's US, Singapore, and Korea, so I'll stay silent on this.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, I'll just start first. I think for Singapore, it's definitely pretty quick in terms of the development of the crypto regulations. I mean, so basically, our crypto regulations in Singapore, it's called the Payment Services Act. It came out in January 2020, and since then, it's basically open for business and for crypto exchanges to submit its license applications to MAS. But obviously, in terms of firms getting licensed and the duration of the review of the license application, that's a separate discussion because MAS, as a very prudent Tier 1 financial regulator, they look out for a variety of criteria in order to license a crypto exchange. So I would say the speed of development of the crypto regulations in Singapore is pretty quick. But then, whether or not a firm gets a license, that is subject to whether the firm can satisfy the requirements set by MAS. Yeah.
So, from the U.S. context, and obviously, regulation as it applies to crypto touches on a wide variety of fields. I'll just speak a little bit to an area where I've had the privilege to practice is with respect to anti-money laundering regulations and regulations pertaining to economic sanctions. And I'll just note that, just echoing what I mentioned earlier, we've valued the productive relationship that we've had with the Treasury Department, with FinCEN in the United States. And I think one of the ways in which we've benefited is that FinCEN has been very proactive in offering guidance to the industry about what regulations may or may not apply to certain kinds of crypto service models. We talked a little bit earlier about how do you know if the travel rule even applies to the wallet or service that you're offering. FinCEN in 2019 offered some guidance to this very question, which has been really helpful for those of us in the industry to navigate these questions. So I think we're hopeful that that kind of that approach, that framework is going to continue, and then we'd like to continue to be a part of those productive dialogues with FinCEN.
한국 관점에서 이 크립토 레귤레이션의 속도와 진전 양상 이렇게 말씀드린다고 하면 저희는 그동안 이렇게 많이 따라가는 형국이었어요. 근데 그러한 관점이 있을 수밖에 없었던 것이 이 크립토 생태계에 대한 충분한 이해 그리고 이 시민사회와 규제당국 간의 그 긴밀한 의사소통 이런 것이 없었기 때문에 그 이해도 수준이 좀 처지지 않는가. 그런데 오늘 이 자리에 이렇게 많이 우리 동료 한국 분들 오신 것처럼 저희들의 관심과 역량도 이제 굉장히 많이 높아졌거든요. 그래서 지금 제가 업비트 케어, 업비트 투자자보호센터 웹사이트를 통해서 미국 바이든 대통령의 Executive Order 그리고 루미스 질리브렌트 의원이 상원에 제출한 그 Responsible Financial Innovation Act 뭐 이런 것들을 제가 이렇게 번역해드리고 또 미카의 그 Market in Crypto Regulation이라고 하는 유로존의 이런 그 법령들의 내용을 소개해드리는 이유가 저들은 굉장히 그 깊이 있는 그리고 넓은 이런 그 긴밀한 대화를 통해서 어떤 정답지를 찾아가고 있구나 그런 관점에서 보면 저희가 조금 부족한 측면이 있습니다. 그래서 이런 것들을 해외 사례 이런 것을 저희가 긴밀하게 또 아주 정확하게 포착을 해서 서로 많이 공유를 하고 새로운 규칙과 제도에 녹여낸다고 하면 이 글로벌리 우리가 뒤처지거나 이렇게 하지 않을 것이라고 저는 생각을 합니다. Thank you.
Thank you. I think in the interest of time, we can only take one more question. This question is sorry. What's the most common question or concern that crypto users would have when the crypto exchange joins the Veritfiabase? I guess this question is for me. I think it's most of the clients that come to us, they actually have questions about the regulations. While we are a fintech, we are in no position to offer regulatory advice, clearly, but we do try to engage the entire industry, which is why in Korea we form working groups. We have working groups happening in Singapore as well, where we bring the industry together as one to kind of understand the regulations together so that minimally everyone kind of moves in the same direction in complying to the regulations, it's either we are all correct together or we are all wrong together, right? So that's why we do all these working groups in where we operate. But I hope that answers the question. But are there any? I think we're done on time. Unless there are any closing comments from the panel. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very productive discussion and panel. 네, 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 고맙습니다.